For Creamer Media's Polity, I'm Shannon de Rehove. I'm at the ISS in Pretoria to meet with Hamadzaripi Tamukamoyo to discuss political leadership in South Africa. In your article about political leadership in South Africa, you state that there is a strong sense that the country needs a change of course if it's to become a stable and prosperous nation. What are the key changes that are needed?
I think we need a government that is really committed to dealing with corruption. I think the scourge of corruption is a major issue and it's a problem to the development of the country. So instead of the usual political rhetoric that we see in the media coming from high-ranking government officials, we really need government to be active, to be proactive in dealing with corruption, and we haven't seen this. Most recently, the Public Service Commission noted that the government loses of almost R1 billion between 2010 and 2011 as a result of corruption. And this is because of public sector corruption. This is corruption that involves government official or senior government managers in government departments who are doing business with government. And I think there are conflict of interest issues there, to say that you have a senior manager who probably sits on a committee that adjudicates a bid, and they have an interest in firms that are doing business with government. And also we have seen senior managers who are charged with financial misconduct simply because there's a culture of impunity and a culture of no consequence in the government. So I think we need to move beyond political rhetoric to say we're really going to aggressively deal with corruption.
The run-up to the ANC's National Electoral Conference in December should provide the ruling party with an opportunity to consider the extent to which current leaders are succeeding in solving the country's problems. However, this isn't happening. Can you elaborate on why this is so?
Well, I think we have seen a government, a ruling party, that really wants to shut down debate on issues such as succession, for instance. I think it's critical to also engage with the citizens of South Africa to say what kind of leadership do they want. And we have seen the ANC shutting down debate on succession. It's limited debate. That's one thing. I think that we saw in the ANC policy conference, they have some documents that are to do with regeneration of the party. And I think this links to what we've been talking about, to say we need a leadership that is really committed, that is patriotic, that really understands the needs of the people on the ground. And we're not saying this. What we have actually seen is that we've got very narrow interests that are being protected by the political elite in South Africa. And I think what we do need is a situation where, going into the future, we have the people of South Africa holding the ANC accountable, holding government officials accountable. And I think if the next dispensation really demonstrates that they are committed to uplifting people in South Africa, uplifting them out of poverty, if they saw that they are committed to dealing with corruption, we lose billions of dollars as a result of corruption. And we haven't seen anything beyond political rhetoric, like I said, coming from the ruling party.
Many within the ANC fear that being linked to what could turn out to be a losing faction could result in the loss of government positions or access to patronage. How do you think that this impacts on internal ANC democracy?
Well, I would like to take you back to 2007 when we had the Polokwane conference. What we noticed is that those who were within the faction that lost, that were supporting former President Mbeki, that faction that lost, we saw those officials, those government officials, losing positions in government. And also, one of the problems that we have is that the current dispensation is anchored in a politics of patronage. So what that means is that once you are in a losing faction, it means that post Mangaung, you are going to lose access to tenders. This is the problem, that we have got a politics of patronage, that people want to access or want positions within the ANC and within government so that they can plunder state resources. I mean, how do you explain, for example, Zuma's nephew, who before Polokwane, for example, or was some taxi, had some taxi operation, but now he's worth millions of rands because he has got access to tenders, he has got shares that were mysteriously given to him, for example. So it is that kind of politics that is really dangerous to the country. And it is also because we've got the political elite within the ANC that want to access those kind of opportunities. So if you are seen to be aligned to any faction that loses, for example, at Mangaung, definitely you're not going to be able to access state resources.
You state that those with aspirations to political leadership have a better chance at success if they act in the interests of a narrow political elite. Can you provide an example of this?
I think we have seen, for example, I think in the media it's been called the secrecy bill. In the case of the secrecy bill, a few days before there was a vote for this, there were reports that even ANC MPs had not been given the most recent version of the secrecy bill. And we know that they hadn't read it, but still they go on to vote for such legislation. They know it themselves. So those are the narrow political, those narrow interests that I'm talking about. And they know that the secrecy bill, it protects the political elite within the ANC. And they know, I'm sure in their conscience, they know that this is wrong, but still they vote for this. And then we saw the ANC, some within the ANC calling for Ben Chirok, for example, to be disciplined, simply because he took a stance, I think, in saying that the secrecy bill was wrong. So I think those are the kind of issues that we need to deal with, to say that going into the future, do we have MPs within Parliament that have got the wishes, aspirations, and the demands of the citizens in South Africa? They've got them at heart when they do vote, instead of voting for those narrow political interests that protect a political elite. And when you have got a clique of politicians who are coming together, definitely I think the people of South Africa, and these politicians are supposed to be accountable to the people of South Africa, but they're only accountable to the party itself and not the electorate. And I think there is a problem there. So when we have people who are disciplined, who are patriotic, who have the interests of the people at heart, those people are punished, within the ANC.
The consolidation and promotion of democracy in South Africa has started to depend more on civil society, the judiciary and the media than on politicians who are supposed to represent the will of the people. Do you think this is a healthy development that has the power to compensate for problems in ANC processes?
Well, I don't think that civil society should compensate for the shortcomings of government. Civil society does have a role to play within a constitutional democracy, but what we have seen recently is that there is a very adversarial relationship between civil society and government. Let's take, for example, the Limpopo textbook scandal, where government had to be taken to court simply to do something that is government is supposed to do. Or when government has to be taken to court, in the case of the secrecy bill, simply because it desires to shut down freedoms, hard-won freedoms that were won through an anti-apartheid struggle. So it's those kind of examples where we see a government that is not interested in transparency. That's one thing. What we should have actually ideally is a cooperative relationship between civil society and government. A government should not be taken to court, for instance, for illegally evicting people. Constitutionally, the executive is being taken to court simply because it's not adhering to the constitution. I think we would expect in a constitutional democracy a government that seriously, that is serious about adhering to the precepts that are set out in the constitution. Not that we should take government to court to adhere to its own laws. Why should that be the case? So I think we have an unhealthy relationship between civil society and government at the moment. But it is necessary, I think, in a constitutional democracy that civil society takes government to task when government simply decides to disregard court rulings, for example, simply decides to disregard the constitution, the law of the land.
Now, you support the idea of electoral reform in South Africa with the aim of introducing a system where the electorate will have a direct say over who represents them, rather than the current proportional representation system where party leaders decide who will be representatives in parliaments and legislatures. What type of electoral reform do you advocate? And by what process do you see electoral reforms being taken forward in South Africa?
Well, it's not as if we are working from a blank slate. We had a commission of inquiry into electoral reform. And I think what we saw was that the ruling party did not have appetite for for electorate, that report was simply shelved. The late Frederick van Slybbert, he led a commission of inquiry into electoral reform, and he suggested, I think, in his report, that it was indeed time for South Africa, for instance, for the Parliament, the National Assembly, to have a debate on national reform. So we have a document that we can work from. We're not saying that the findings of the Commission of Inquiry should be adhered, but definitely I think we do need debate at national level and also in our National Assembly. So that is where we'll start. I think the practice of having slates, for example, the practice of having party lists, a practice where also we have MPs that are accountable not to the electorate, but to the party. So what actually ends up happening is that MPs toe the party line instead of, in actual fact, advancing the interests of the electorate. And you have seen that in the case of, for example, the secrecy bill, in the case of calls for Ben Chirok to be disciplined. It's because we know that the ANC has the power to discipline its members. It has the power to recall its members. In actual fact, it should be the electorate, through elections, that should have the power to say, we're not happy with the way this MP is performing, we're not going to vote him into power. So I think we need to start there, to have that debate, and if need be, into the future, to say what are the propositions, what do different sectors in civil society, government, ruling party, the opposition, what do they propose in terms of electoral reform? We have some document, we have suggestions, and the document is put out and there's debate on it. And if need be, then we can have a referendum, a national referendum, where people say they suggest what kind of options they would like. And this would be very simple. It can simply be done even during an election. It could be one of the things that the electorate would have to tick, or when they vote. So it wouldn't have to be a very expensive process. It could just be done in tandem with a normal national election or a parliamentary election.
That was Hamadzaripi Tamuka Moyo to discuss political leadership in South Africa.